Many of our sisters used to kill their children rather than allow their children to be born into enslavement. And this was the punishment. And the collar never left their necks until they had produced a child. In other words, your punishment for, if you like, sparing your child from enslavement was that you had to wear this collar until you actually got another child to replace the child that was lost. The blowing up of a slave had its own name. In quotes here it's got, to burn a little powder in the arse of a nigger. That's the quote. Obviously, this was no freak, but a recognized practice. It comes from the Black Jacobins. A book, I know you've tried to get it, sister. If you can get hold of this book, get it. It's a very important part of our history. Written by C.L.R. Jones. Now, Roots, the film Roots. You know, there's a scene in Roots where a couple get married, they jump over the broom. Anybody remember that? When a couple get married, they jump over the broom from the land of being single to the land of being married. And on their wedding night, you know, they're just about to go and enjoy their wedding night. And Massa comes to the door. And Massa knocks on the door. And he says, "Boy, wait outside." And then he goes in and rapes the wife. And the husband cannot leave that spot. He must stay there and experience the rape of his wife on her wedding night. In fact, on their wedding night. You know, can you imagine what it is to be a man and to have to just stand by whilst another man rapes your wife on your wedding night? Can you imagine what it must be like to be a woman on your wedding night? The night that you prepared for, in some senses, all your life. And instead of your husband coming to make love to you, some creature comes to devour you, to abuse you, to molest you, to do all kinds of wickedness to you. Can you imagine? You see, our ancestors didn't have to imagine this. That's what actually happened. And, you know, that was an example of a good, in quotes, massacre. Because I suppose Massa could have knocked the door and said to the wife, "Girl, stand outside." Because some of them did. And you wait there whilst I deal with your husband. And she would have had to listen to her husband being devoured and debased by one of the masses with the homosexual tendency. But both of those kind of, they don't pale into insignificance, they can never pale into insignificance. But they're made to look almost good by comparison. So can you imagine when Massa knocked the door and said to the husband and the wife, "Wait outside," and went inside to sexually molest, abuse, and rape the children? Don't be under any illusions. This is what was done to us. Our children were raped. We knew that they were being raped. And within that system of slavery, we thought there was nothing that we could do about it. Other kinds of indignity were, sexual indignity, were heaped on us also. So, can you imagine what it is to have two men, heterosexual men, in the village, forced to perform homosexual acts with each other in front of the whole village? Because these things happen. So they would get one African man to put the genitals of another African man in his mouth. This is serious thing. These are serious things. I'm just explaining to you some of the things that were done to us.
I mean, we've just recently seen what happened in Iraq.
Yeah. In fact, we see the techniques. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because we see the techniques manifesting themselves again, even in the modern day in Iraq. Right? And they would force an African man to drink the sperm of another African man. It would be a private act. They'd call the whole village out to see it. The children would have to look at that. The children would have to see their father drinking the semen of another African man. The wife would have to see her husband drinking the semen of another African man. Now, you know, even if you are homosexual, the likelihood is that you would not want this to be seen as a public act. And even if you felt that you wanted it to be seen as a public act, the likelihood is you wouldn't want your own children to see you engaging in these types of activity. So again, this is part of the psychological torture that you mentioned, designed to keep everybody in order. Because if I'm good, then maybe I won't have to drink the sperm of another man. We also begin to get a sense of why in our community there's this big reaction to homosexuality. Because these are the things that we were put through as a people. And so we react whenever this kind of issue of homosexuality is waved in front of us like a red flag to a bull. We react because that's what we were put through. And for those of us who are Africans whose history passes through the Caribbean, we have it in our family somewhere. One of the ancestors, possibly multiples of our ancestors, went through these experiences. Now, I said before that one of the consequences of war is that women are raped. And it's taken as one of the kind of privileges that the so-called victorious soldiers practice. What happened to us was, and what's happening in Iraq also today, that we can see for ourselves, is that kind of rape is being inflicted on the men also. And that rape was inflicted on the men also during slavery. Now I want to move from that and talk about, because we're dealing with the horrors of slavery, I want to talk about a character called Thomas Thistlewood. If you've never heard of him, I'll ask you to write that name down. And I'll ask you to go and do your own research on this character. Thomas Thistlewood. Thistle, Thisttle, Thistle, Wood, Wood. Thomas Thistlewood. I hate that. Now, Thomas Thistlewood is a self-confessed serial rapist of African women. In fact, he proudly boasts of his rape of African women. Thomas Thistlewood had a plantation on the island of Jamaica, the parish of Westmoreland, Jamaica. Does anybody know Westmoreland in Jamaica? Okay, so a few people here know Westmoreland in Jamaica. And his plantation was ironically called Egypt. That's what he called it, Egypt. I think he was just trying to rub it in and make it worse for us. And he reports that he didn't use the term rape, but I use the term rape, 326 African women. Those are the ones that he reports on. And this man kept a diary of his rape of African women. And he would write in his diary, he'd actually write it into his diary, he'd say, well, he thought the sex with this one was good, and the sex with that one wasn't so good. And then he would, yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to be funny, but our black brothers do that today, but it's not called rape. You get what I mean? They sweet talk one sister, do this with her, and then go boast about it, and then go with the next one. So it's nothing different to what we know right now.
But are they going willingly?
Even so, at the end of the day, yeah, we have to start moving on and trying to better ourselves within our communities, because right now, yeah, my parents have gone through the shock of growing up to see pregnant women hanging from trees at 9 months and having their breasts cut off. But they just have to live with it and raise their children so that the history doesn't repeat itself. Unfortunately, it's repeating itself, but it's being disguised. Do you get what I mean? So.
Yeah, I hear your point. Anybody else want to make a point? There's a few other people want to make points. It's okay, you can make points.
I can't compare the two, because that's if a man sweet talking you before for it, then that's a different subject. We're talking about somebody's got power over you and that's taking. We're not talking about a man sweet talking you. So I can't sort of put
yeah, but you can say that the origins lie here. What you're saying, what happens today, is the same thing.
Yeah, but I also know.
No, not you. I'm saying it's not the same. It's obviously it's happening today because we're still in slave mentality.
It's a mentality that's been put that people are sort of like, it's like what I said with Woody, what Lynch, where he sort of bred that mentality into people, and because people have that mentality, it lasts for only since last 300 years. And I've read other documents as well related to a period of time, like 250 years, that sort of time span that says to last for. I just find it interesting that it is a concept that has still got effects that still do last today, and like I say, it's down to people. I look at Malcolm X and Martin Luther King to change people's hearts and minds to a better style of thinking, so that we can sort of get rid of all these evils that have been sort of laid in the past, really.
I was just going to say that I think those two acts are different. If you want to compare the acts, did you hear about the rape that happened the other day with the 4 boys in Norwood, which dragged the girl into the car, then raped her in Crystal Palace, all 4 of them raped her in Crystal Palace, and then left them in Crystal Palace. Now, that is the same act, but sweet talking is 2 different things.
I think what I'll say is this, because I want to acknowledge the sister's point, that to sweet talk a whole heap of different women, and then to go and sex a whole heap of different women, that's bad behaviour. Let's understand that that's bad behaviour. Now I say this, I'm a man in my 40s now, and I used to behave in those ways once upon a time. And I can tell you that it's not a good way to behave.
There's consent.
Sorry?
Maybe there's consent in the case.
Yeah. So I want to acknowledge that behaviour is bad. But I also want to acknowledge the point that you're making, which is that there are some distinctions, even though both behaviours are bad, there are some distinctions between the two. You see, if a man forces himself onto a woman, I think that has a different dimension from even tricking a woman into having sex with you. I think there are some slightly different dimensions. And I think the woman's willingness or non-willingness is a very important factor. I think that's a very important factor. We mustn't ignore that. But I want to acknowledge your point, sister, that the behaviour is bad behaviour, whether it's through sweet talking or whether it's through battering the woman into submission. Now, this man kept a record. Thomas Thistlewood, this guy actually wrote in his diary that African women gave him gonorrhea. He actually wrote this in his diary. He raped 326 African women, many of them multiple rapes, and then he blames them for giving him gonorrhea. Can you imagine that? This is the gall of the man. And, Thomas Thistlewood was infamous not just for his rape of African women. No woman was safe on the plantation. The reason why I say it's rape is that no woman could refuse him. We've already seen what they do to women that refuse. So no woman could refuse him. You're on his plantation, you just have to, whether you like it or not, the best defense you could have is make sure that he didn't enjoy it. There were many sisters who were raped once, and they made sure it was such a horrible experience that he didn't bother to come back again. That was their defense. Yeah? But he had another punishment. And what I'll do is I'll just read this. Now, this is from a book. I don't think this is a fantastic book, actually. The book is called Centering Women. It's written by a man called Hilary Beckles. And in this book, I've marked the page, I'm just going to read what he has got here, because he had a special kind of punishment which he dished out to us, because Thomas Thistlewood was famous for his punishments. And here's one example. We know this because Thomas Thistlewood wrote diaries. And in his diaries, he'd record the details of his sexual exploits. He'd record the details of the punishment that he gave out. Because, of course, there was nothing wrong with the things that he was doing. It wasn't against the law. I shouldn't say that. I'll say he wasn't breaking any law. Of course, there was something wrong with it, but he wasn't breaking any law. There was no sanction that could be held against him. And here's some of the punishments that he dealt with. It says here, the listing of Abba's punishment indicates that Thistlewood, because of his sexual interest in her, before I go on, Abba was one of the women whom he liked. So she got his attentions more than anybody else. He'd rape her perpetually, And in the end, she actually got a certain amount of power over him. I thought I said that. She got a certain amount of power over him because he was so desperate to have sex with her in particular that it gave her a certain amount of bargaining power with him. I'll just start that again. It says, the listing of Abba's punishments indicates that Thistlewood, because of his sexual interest in her, may have spared her what many others did not escape. For example, when Darby, and Darby was one of the African men on the plantation. For example, when Darby was accused of stealing cane, Thistlewood had him held down and ordered Hector was another African on the plantation who had a special job, and you'll see what that job is in a moment. Thistlewood had him held down and ordered Hector to, and quote from the diary, shit in his mouth. Likewise, when Port Royal, another African, ran away and was caught, Hector was ordered to, in quotes, shit in his mouth, and a gag placed over it whilst full. These two events occurred on May the 26th and July the 25th, 1756, respectively. We've got the evidence on that. When on the 26th and 31st of July, Phyllis, this time a sister on the plantation, was caught stealing cane, she was ordered similarly a mouthful and a gag placed over on both occasions. It's not a fantastic book, but some of the research in here is exceptional. You see, that was his speciality. Hector was his boy. And Hector would do whatever Master ordered him to do. And when Master said shit in his mouth, Hector had to shit on command. Think about that.
And what they gave him to eat.
Think about that. You have to shit on command, you know.
Like the teaching.
Think about that. Yeah? Now, that's not something you do on command. Yeah? But he had to. Think about that. Yeah? Shit in his mouth. Just think about that. Now, I just want to spend a few minutes to think about what we just read. Let this be. Can that be read? My eyes are so bad that I can't see if it can be read. That says Thistlewood, European enslavement. Can you read that? Yeah, okay. This is the African resistor, whoever it was that was being punished. This is Hector, special servant of Massa, the head slave in charge, head Negro in charge, head slave in charge, or whatever. And of course, there's the rest of the African village, the African onlookers. Now, I just want to start a little discussion. Now, when Thistlewood ordered Hector to shit in the mouth of the African who he says was badly behaved, I just want to start a discussion. What do you think was going on inside Thistlewood's head at that time? What would make him do a thing like that? Let's reason amongst ourselves. Is it wicked?
He was sick.
Wicked?
Powerful.
Sick? Power?
He just didn't consider the African to be a human.
He doesn't consider the African to be a human.
Reflection of his society.
It's a reflection of his society. Let's just keep him going. The idea's wrong.
It shows that he can control his own, Hector,
Yeah.
on his own people.
So he's really in
That's
charge,
power
isn't he?
control, yeah.
And it's another sort of
Control,
dividing role.
power.
It's another sort of dividing role.
Yeah, it's another sort of
I'm
divide
sure
and
the
rule.
other slaves
That's
didn't
clear,
like
yeah?
Hector.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I said, I'm sure the other slaves didn't think much of Hector.
Yeah. We're just thinking at the moment
Yeah.
of Thistlewood. We'll come to the other slaves, don't worry, or the other Africans. Yeah. But let's just try and see what's in Thistlewood's mind.
I suppose maybe for him as well, and having Hector sort of shitting people's mouths, as it were, it's sort of making black people deface their own kind. And
Yeah.
I suppose maybe that's that sort of satisfaction they make out of that.
Yeah, there's an extra pleasure in that, isn't there? Yeah.
Because if there was no Hector, then he wouldn't have a stooge to oppress the others. And
Yeah.
like I said, it's sort of breeding that hatred within people to
Yeah.
make someone of a certain race do something to their own race.
Yeah.
And that's that.
Yeah, that's part of the willing to divide and rule, isn't it? That's the, if you shit in my mouth, I hate you. Okay, so let's move from Thistlewood. Let's look at Hector. What's going on in Hector's mind?
What's going to happen to him if he doesn't shit something?
Yeah. That's one of the things that's definitely going on in his mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's in fear as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep him coming. What's going on in his mind?
Well, they will play a role in both sides. To make him go, you'll have to be scared. You know, some people shit themselves.
Yeah. Literally. Yeah, the shit yourself comes from war, where people are so frightened that they lose control of all of their bowel region. And they wet themselves and literally shit themselves because they're so terrified. It actually comes from war. So it's a real term.
He might be even considering himself powerful because, he's been used against his own people,
Yeah.
and maybe he's gaining some favor from Thistlewood.
Yeah. He's in a position of power.
Yes.
He can shit in the mouth of people. It's not everyone that can do that. There's real power attached to that role.
do you not think there might be a fear element? Because in all fairness, if Hector's a man going around shitting in people's mouths, then a lot of people aren't going to like it.
You know, you have to laugh, but it's so serious. It's so, yeah, that's right. That's, you know, look what it's doing to us psychologically. In here. You know, the villagers, and we'll come to them in a minute. But you know, look what it's doing to us. You have to laugh and you have to cry at the same time. Because who could even think of a thing like that? You know, to do. But yeah, I accept that there is fear
The same thing.
and there's power.
It's the same thing like in the Bible. There's always one within the group that has to betray all of them.
Right.
Same thing
But
like
in saying
Judas.
that though,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
saying that though, I mean, anybody would like to escape the kind of harsh punishment that everyone else is going to get. If your way can escape it by being the master, step boy, whatever it may be, after a certain level, you're gonna want to be that person.
That's interesting, isn't it?
I mean, despite how many kind of disgusting things have to do to himself and other people, he's in a better position than other people around him.
So that's a good way. This is a good way of making sure you don't get your mouth shut.
Well, from Hector's perspective, it's better to be doing than to be safe.
Yeah. So there's a benefit in this role. I mean, forget about for a moment. You have to draw down your trousers and expose your genitals to everybody in the village whilst you're shitting somebody's mouth. Just leave that aside just for one moment. Yeah. But you know, there's a certain privilege in that role, isn't there? Yeah. There's a certain shame and humiliation in that role, but there's a certain privilege and power. Sir? Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, he certainly got more power than the person who's receiving the bundle in the mouth. That's clear. Any other comments on what's going through Hector's mind? What's it?
It's got to do with what's going in Hector's mind. I personally think that's one of the problems we're in that system today because there's too many Hectors around.
Yeah. That's the truth, isn't it? That's the truth. Let's come back and discuss the Hectors in our society in a little while. Okay, let's just go through this first so we can just get a sense of what's going on in people's minds. Okay, you're the African resistor. You know, you're the person who Massa said has done something wrong, so that means you're a hero or a hero. Yeah, Massa said you did something wrong. What's going through your mind?
I want to be next.
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural response, isn't it? It's a natural response. You want to kill him, but why do you want to kill him?
Well, he shouldn't do it. He should have stood up, if they kill him, then they kill him.
So he should die rather than shit in your mouth.
Yeah. Somebody has to stand up.
Somebody's got to stand up. What other views do we have? What's going through, the African resistors' mind?
Well, again, he's not going to resist again because this has happened and it's like, boy, I ain't going to try that one again.
Yeah, it kind of dissuades you from resisting, doesn't it?
I mean, and it's not only like it happened in private, so your wife might see it, your kids, your people's laughing at you, or they will talk to you and go, oh, whatever, it's just, you're not going to go there.
Yeah, there was no conflict.
I think you've got to give people that did resist credit because there's a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to stand up, and especially in adversity and knowing what could happen. And I think the resistors are good because it sets an example for all the African onlookers to see that there are people who acknowledge that this is wrong, and that there are people that are willing to stand up and fight and try and make a difference, even though Hector might shit in their mouth. They're willing to sort of step out and try and make that step, and I think that's important. Because otherwise you've got the onlookers sitting there looking at Hector with all power and looking at the resistance, and you need to have somebody on the side of right.
Yeah.
And that's what the resistance
As an African, you've got to be willing to give your life to Africa. And if you're not willing to give your life to Africa, you're going to be someone just like Hector. But Hector is actually, basically, if you're not an African resistor, you're just as bad as Hector. Because Hector, at least Hector's in a no-win situation. But you're some African who's going like as if that's a bad thing that's happening to these people, to Hector, or he's a bad man, or Thistlewood, or whatever. If you're not doing nothing as an African, if you're not doing nothing, then you might as well be dead. So you've got to stand up like the suicide bombers and give your life for Africa.
It's just the same thing. It's just the same thing, like using your own person to betray you. It weakens the spirit more than him himself going to shit in your own mouth. Because you probably resist it and say, okay, it's just him. But if you see your own kind doing the same thing, it goes back to the same divide and rule. And that's the same thing that happens within the society today. It's same to the Bible too. Because you have to use someone within their own inner circle to break them.
I mean, I just want to add this. I just want to add to what Brahman said.
Yeah, go ahead.
With this would be at the top. One thing we have to realize is the Hector will always be created, regardless.
Yeah.
There will always be a Hector created.
That's it. Any media.
One of us
Will always? Continue your point.
will always be created, and Thistlewood needs the Hector there to keep the resistors where they are. So if the resistors don't fight from within, like Brother said, get up and be ready to die for the cause, then the Hector will always be there. So being concerned with Hector is not really. But if you take Hector from there, another one, you'll probably be the next Hector anyway.
It's just the same thing. It goes like, you say, I'm more afraid of my friends than my enemies, because I'm always watching my enemies.
Yeah, go ahead, continue.
I just have an open heart with my friends. You see, my defenses are down with my friends. But my enemies, I'm always watching them, because I know they can't come close to me.
Okay. So,
I was going to say sometimes Hector helps the resistors because that happened in the island of Jamaica, and as an island they never stopped resisting. They went on even worse. Do you know what I mean? And that actual island, Jamaica, was a place where in other islands they said if you don't behave yourself, we're going to send you to Jamaica.
that's true history. That's
Yes,
true
in
history,
fact.
sisters. That is true history. It was a punishment island.
Yeah.
You know, if you were in quote bad slave, which means that you're a good African, then you were sent to Jamaica as your punishment because they had, especially the Scottish enslavers out there, who were the most wicked. Thistle, the Scottish thistle, thistlewood, thistle is Scottish. And they were renowned for some of their wickedness. And that's why you'll get names in Jamaica, for instance, the island of Jamaica, like McFarland, say, or MacDonald. Exactly. All of these kinds of names are directly connected to Scotland. We were accused by English, Scottish, and all kinds of people, actually. So I'm not trying to make out. I'm not trying to make out that one set was better than the other. The Scottish did have a special dimension in their treatment of us. Okay, let's move on to the onlookers, the villagers. They've been given some entertainment. They can see Hector's genitals. They can see the shit going into the African resistors' mouth. What was going on in their minds?
I don't want to be in that position. They wouldn't want to be in that position where they're having to open their mouths to get food in their mouths.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be in that position. I've not even seen it, so I agree with you. So I agree with you.
I suppose if you look at Thistlewood's sort of regime, as it were, it's sort of like he's sort of setting this as a norm as well. So people were sort of, or the onlookers sort of looking into the situation and thinking this is a regular occurrence. This is what was practiced here.
Yeah, we can see lots of examples in the little text I just
said.
Yeah,
that's probably another thing that they sort of take from this as well.
Any other comments?
Maybe rather than the African resistor being a hero to them, like I said, coming back from Joe, which is saying, because they were resisting, they actually seen as heroes by their village. Years go by, this become a joke to the village, why did you do that silly thing? Look what's happened to you now. And, tell children, look what's going to happen to you, do what I say, that kind of thing.
That's literally.
They might just make a mockery of the thing, like a shit mouth, and start like to stigmatize you for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that happen. Things that actually happen.
Yeah, I'd just want to bring that in like to the way we live our lives now.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
There's too many onlookers. And it's like, the African community calls for rallies, for instance, if let's say Thistlewood ordered Hector to kill an African resistor in our streets now, 2005, and there's enough onlookers reading reading the newspapers, watching the television,
Yeah.
sitting at home,
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, look what happened to that nigga." You know what I mean? We need more African resistance because, you know what I mean, the Thistlewood, Hector, and even the African resistor, the wickedness that happens to him, is all there to keep the onlooker an onlooker. Because it's the onlookers that give these people their power.
Well,
And I
that's
think
what
it-
I was going to say, because Hector is separated from the community, it's the idea of individualism. So everyone's like, well, if I just take care of myself, I know that I won't be in the position of
There's
resistance.
there's three people.
No, this is a holy people.
No. Thistlewood, Hector, and the one resistor that keeping all those onlookers still slaves. A minority keeping the majority asleep.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's more of fear.
yeah, it's fear. That's how fear is.
Yeah, I think it's more the fear that has been installed by that regime. So I think the question is, how can we break that fear?
Good question.
You know what?
Very good question.
It's like it's not very easy, but it's like fear. It's like it's just fear, isn't it? It's
I
just
think what happens now is that the Hector doesn't come openly now. What they do most of the time is if they think like a black movement is getting strong, because the thing they fear most is you to think for yourself. Okay, what happens now? They go to the prison cell and they see this black man there, he's having 20 years, and they strike a deal with him. If you do this, we're gonna give you 5 years. And go out there and infiltrate your organization. So when he goes in there, he just, he comes like a brother, and you see his skin. You're not able to see beyond that skin color. Because so you see the skin and you just take open to him and he just divided and you got all the information out.
Now, I just want to ask a question. What do you think of Hector?
Think about it.
What do you think of Hector? He's the shitter in the mouth. What do you think?
Too much fish.
I personally think there's a balance between Hector and everyone else because he, on one side, is trying to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet, on the other side, he's going against his own people. And that goes a lot back. If you put it to 2005, that happens all the time. Like just last week, I saw a young boy being pulled over by the police. I asked the police for what reason, and they switched on me and started asking me my details. You know what I'm saying? All this kind of stuff.
And it's very funny when I do that, they don't dare ask me my name.
Obviously,
They don't
I didn't.
dare ask me my name.
Yeah. But it just
I've
shows
had to
you. It
protect
just shows you that.
one of our
You know
young
what I'm
brothers.
saying?
In fact, one of our young brothers, I'm glad to say, received an apology from the police when I asked them what do they think they were doing. And he actually received an apology from the police. I'm glad to say that he's going to pursue them and at least get a few bits of change as well. But yes, I commend you for standing up when you saw them brutalizing your brother. I commend you for that. And all of us should stand up. There's some simple rules actually. It's a digression, but it's an important digression. As long as you do not interfere with the police physically, you can observe. So when the police come with their faces to me, I say, I am observing. Just use those words. They will understand what it means. It means that they cannot interfere with you. And when they harass you further, you say, stop harassing me whilst I am observing. They will understand that also. And then they will start to back off you because they will take the impression from those words that you know the law. Yeah? So I am observing. That's the first thing you say. And the second thing you say, when they keep on coming at you, stop harassing me whilst I am observing. You don't need to get into any more conversation with them than that. Because if at that point they ask you your name, you've already told them that they're harassing you. Yeah? And you've already told them what you're doing. You're lawfully entitled to it. That was a digression. What do you think Hector thinks of Thistlewood?
I think Hector, although everybody look at Hector as a traitor, but Hector has a brain. Hector could use any opportunity he has to take out Thistlewood. So you can't really look at Hector as bad in a sense. because you never know what Hector could do. I have an example. Here in England, the police, Scotland Yard, they went down to Jamaica to get a Yahoo to come and, infiltrate those in England. And they took him out of jail, brought him here, infiltrated, and then turned against him.
Yeah, I've actually got the details of that.
Yeah, that was a heavy Hector.
This is now we're really dealing with the mechanics of this relationship. Yeah? Because Hector, there's no pleasure in shitting in people's mouths. Not unless you're some kind of freak, sexual, I don't know. There might be somebody in the world that gets some kind of pleasure like that. But for the majority of us, there is no pleasure. What pleasure is there in shitting in other people's mouths? What pleasure is there in drawing down your trousers so that everybody can see your genitals in the whole village whenever master tells you to? So actually, Hector is quite correctly operating out of fear and all kinds of things. But there's a danger that Hector could be the first to kill Thistlewood. Given half the chance, he might kill Thistlewood first. But Hector still can't be friends with the others because who wants to be friends with anybody that shits in the mouths of, your sisters and brothers? So it's a complicated situation. This is what we call, in global terms, neocolonialism. Yeah? The purpose of Massa is to look after himself. The purpose of the neocolonial is to look after Massa and to shit on everybody else. The purpose of the resistor is to look after Massa. And the reason he's having his mouth shut is because he's not looking after Massa, he's doing something that Massa doesn't want him to do.
Yeah.
And the purpose of the onlookers is to look after Massa. And the reason why this is not a private thing, because it would be bad enough if it was private, the reason why it's public is because Massa wants them to continue to look after Massa's interests. And he doesn't want them to get any ideas about doing anything different. This is what happens when you do something different.
You see, looking at that sort of map that you've got up there, it's a very interesting comparison to how life is today for us.
It's exactly
because when you look at Thistlewood, this is sort of like the government, the sort of regime that we live under. Yeah. And when you look at the African onlooker, that's sort of like the public in general. That's right. And the resistors out there are the people out there who sort of want to change the world for the better. Yeah. And the Hectors are your police. That's They're your armed forces. They're your Rupert Murdoch media. They're the people that are going to put all the bad information together, that are going to take all the crap that Thistlewood gives them and give it in a nice little package for the onlookers to see, to deter them from standing up and doing what's right in this world, which is what the African resistors is trying to do. And that's why this is an interesting diagram that you set up there, because it's very, very relevant to the world we live in today. And I'll tell you another funny thing as well, which I suppose didn't come across as well, is if you look at the way the diagram's set up, Hector is standing in front of the African resistor getting to Thistlewood. And in a sense, a lot of the African resistors' attention, as it may be, would be diverted towards Hector. And it's a similar way that we are today, because a lot of us are focused more on, say, the police instead of the government. And they're faced looking at the media instead of the government. And there are problems out there that are to do with the government and to do with Thistlewood in this case. But instead of sorting that, we're looking at Hector, and there's that difference there.
I mean, you've unlocked the key. That's beautiful commentary. You've actually unlocked the key. Because, you see, I'm not talking to you about slavery just as a kind of historical event. I want you to understand that slavery is here, now. The systems that are in place, it may not be shitting in the mouth now, although it may be. They may have other tools which they use. But this is what we're living in now. That's what our ancestors were living in on the plantation, the Egypt plantation, under Thistlewood. And we're living in this right here, right now, under Tony Blair. So we have to make those connections, and we are the African onlookers, or the general public onlookers.
Some people call it the system.
Yeah, the system that's in place at the moment, the imperialist system, and this is the neo-colonial mechanism for keeping people in order.
And sometimes I relate this sector to African government.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's Thistlewood too.
to imperialism itself. Yeah, that's exactly what's going on here. This is imperialism. This is the neo-colonial governments that you find in Africa and other parts of the world. These are the people, yeah, some of whom are resisting, the rest are just looking on and think you can't fight them. But what would happen if they decided to have a war?
See, that's the great Marxist theory. See, Marx reckons that you have the hoi polloi, sort of general public, proletariat, and you have the bourgeoisie, which are the upper classes. And the proletariat, the working class, work to keep the upper classes and give them their status. But according to Marx, or Marxist theory, that there will come a time where the hoi polloi, the working class, will be bollocks to all this, we're going to overthrow the government and have more power for everyone. And that's where this whole theory comes, where there will come a time where people will get their act together and will want to revolt against the powers that be. The problem is that we have institutions to keep us in power. We have the police, we have the government, we have the media, we have when we go to school, the first thing we learn when we go to school is that if you misbehave, you get detention, you get put in trouble. And this isn't, we don't go to school in this country to teach us education, to teach us our ABCs and our 1, 2, 3s. We go to school in this country to learn to obey rules that our teachers tell us. Right? So that when we go outside, when we go into society, we obey the rules that society tells us. So we're, in a sense, being bred to conform to a system that the government wants us to follow, which is capitalism.
That's right.
It is.
It's going to be hard.
The most hideous and evil system known to humanity. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's going to be hard because that system, because they oppress you in a very subtle way that you don't even know that you've been oppressed. Just take for example, like in Brixton, like, okay, they push you, they know that it's normal, natural. When you get to the wall, you don't have anywhere to go, so you're going to have to fight back. So it's then when they come in with their black programs and all that, they give you a few breathing space and you relax. And they push you. And you relax, and they push you, because if they know that they pass that line, that wall, that you're going to have to fight back. So that's how they just do it. So they keep pushing you and you don't even know that they're pushing you.
I just want to say, sorry, another thing, another interesting point as well that's been highlighted at the moment, that the government are trying at the moment to sort of try and pass a bill to be able to arrest people in this country and take them to Guantanamo Bay and hold them for an indefinite amount of time with no legal reason to hold people whatsoever, with no evidence. And the problem is that this is starting to come into this sort of disordered situation where nowadays, where they feel they can't deal with the African resistor, as it were, in front of everybody else, they need to take the African resistor away, but in private, so they can deal with him. And they don't want to let this sort of message get out. And I think, in a sense, nowadays we all have to be like African resistors, and we all have to step forward and sort of try and make a voice and try and do the right thing and try and make a change in this world. Because, like I said, there's a lot of tools to put here to stop us from doing that. I think television and computer games are one of those things, because I think people would be out revolting in the streets now if they weren't going out to watch EastEnders or watch the Champions League football. I mean, like I said, television plays such a massive part in people's lives. It tells us what to think, it tells us how to act. When you watch soap shows, it tells you sort of, it gives you a generalisation of lifestyle, and people need to wake up and start thinking differently, because times are changing very quickly.
Yeah, because I was going to touch on that point before, because since 9/11, media and everything have helped to perpetrate that, we need to have all of these police around because, we're in fear of this terror. Because I've noticed myself, there's been a lot of police roadblocks, and it's just like any sort of man. It could be a man with dark hair, it could be a red-skinned black man, it could be an Indian-looking man. They're arresting them because they're suspecting them to be terrorists.
I suppose a lot of this is propaganda.
But the public can't do nothing, so they're just steamrolling these rules and don't realise what are happening.
Well, it's got to remember that the public, we are the public, but we are the leftovers of this society. So the public are brainwashed. The public are speaking English. It's not English language. Everything in the English language is derogatory to black people. So even as I'm speaking now, if people say black magic, people turn around and say, even when you say, look, your face so black because you got dirt on it, all those kind of things are everyday general things which keeps us down.
I think things have moved on from that now, because they talk about the global village now, so it's not so much of this person forces now. Even America wants to rule the world, basically. They're talking about, over here, about having ID cards and things like that. Then they're talking about having this laser thing to put on the card. Next minute, they're going to want to put computer chip in your hand, all that kind of rubbish. So it's all, it's gone big. I mean, you know, what's happened in Africa was like, you know, like it's an experiment. It's now going to be global.
Does anybody in here know what fascism is?
Yes.
Can somebody just give me an idea of what fascism is? Anybody? This is not a trick question, no? Yeah, go
They
ahead.
sort of people, they sort of tell people, well, they dress in black and tell people what to do, and like basically it's like saying, these are my ideas, and you're going to conform to my ideas, and if you don't want to conform to my ideas, we're ways of dealing with you. And that's basically what it is. It's sort of like bullying people into living your life the way that I want you to live it.
Now, you see, capitalism is the most evil system. This is my view I'm expressing here. I don't come here to be neutral. I don't come with that pretense. Capitalism is the most evil and wicked system known to humanity throughout all time. And we're living in it now. When capitalism turns rancid, when it starts to rot, and it starts to lose the psychological control of the people, it then turns to physical controls of the people. Identity cards has been mentioned as part of the extended physical control. The extension of police powers becomes part of the physical control. You know, the battering and murdering of innocent people, deaths in custody for Africans shoots up to enormous proportions. And all kinds of wickedness. When capitalism starts to go wrong, when they start to lose control, they get desperate. And they do all kinds of wickedness to people. And one of the wickedness is what you just mentioned, where they want to just whip people off the streets now. You know, send them off to Guantanamo, but they've got a guy on trial. They put a guy on trial in court yesterday. Asian man, they want to send him off to Guantanamo Bay because they say that he was doing computers for some Islamic group or something like that. Just making up rubbish, and on the back of that rubbish, persecuting people. Yeah? We live in a fascist state now.
Yeah.
We must understand we live in a fascist state now. Never mind Hitler. Yeah? Even South Africa. You know? This country is operating on that basis now. You see? What's happening is they are now shitting in everybody's mouths. Sorry, it's the wrong way around. Now everybody's having their mouths shat in, but some of us don't even recognize that that's what's happening to us. They're shitting in all of our mouths at the moment. Yeah? And you know, we can look at each other with our mouths full of shit. We're in a very serious situation. And my view is that we should all be resistors. African resistors as Africans, but other people should be resisting because they're catching a certain amount of hell as well. We get it worse. But other people get a certain amount of hell also. So everybody should be resisting this evil, wicked system called capitalism. That's the view that I'm going to express on this. Let me take a few concluding comments before I start to bring the lecture to a close, because I'm sure I've got much longer than was anticipated.
I think Hector comes in lots of different forms, though.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I think Hector comes in lots of different forms. It's not always a person.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at labels and stuff, you know, how they use control for you to detract from what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
You know, some of these users come across as resistors, yet still they buy into the very forms that these people make their money from.
I mean, that label point is very important because the African resistor is now called a terrorist. This is the English language. Yeah. The name for the resistor now is terrorist.
Well, let's not say the name. Let's say it's been labelled.
It's
a label.
It's
a label they put over it to make the hyper loyal, the people that the media tells you to, that believe it, that these people are terrorists.
Yeah. So we see the way our minds are being worked.
And then
Twist upside down.
The people within our society today who think they're resistance, i.e. the boys who choose to go and shoot crack, I'm not going to get a job because I'm anti-capitalism. They don't realise that they're all still working, or working more within the system with what they're doing to try and like, sell drugs or do anything else that's like illegal. And the whole label of criminal, I would say, is like you're only a criminal if someone calls you that. If your family needs food and you go out and get it, are you a criminal?
Well, I'm going to, one day, if you'll have me, I'll come back and I will explain the way the drug industry works. I just happen to have this book, which I'm reading at the moment, Dope Incorporated. This is a book that you'll find very hard to get hold of. If you can get it, hold on to it.
Who wrote it?
Dope Incorporated. They call themselves the Executive Intelligence Review. This was written by a person. Yeah? Intelligence Executive Review are the authors of this book. And what it basically shows is how the monarch of Britain is in charge, not loud, no, the monarch is in charge of the drug industry, the world drug industry. It's not allowed. And 10 Downing Street draws up the plans for the drugs, along with, the president of US Satan, and, even China is involved. There's a lot to it. I don't want to digress. Yeah? But this is about 4 lectures by itself. Yeah? And anybody who is in drugs is actually working to help imperialism, because it's imperialism that actually targets our communities for the drugs. And there's a whole heap that I could say on that, but I'm not going to go in that direction. I just want you to be aware of this book, Dope Incorporated, the book that drove Kissinger crazy.
Drugs is another hector as well in a sense. It's
Yeah.
another tool that's used to
Yeah.
take people down. Like
That's
people
right.
aren't going out because they're busy sitting inside getting high.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, you see, we've used the horrors of slavery as a mechanism to talk about what's going on. That's where we are.
But I just wanted to question whether we're not all
Sorry,
actors.
I don't know if I must be getting older. I can't hear you too well. Could you just speak
I
up a
just
little?
want to question whether we're not all actors.
Well, this is a very important question. This is a very important question.
Yeah. I'm not answering the question. I still have some comment.
Okay.
So can I say, to go along with what this is just said here, I think what most of us have is an inferior complex of the powers that be, and we're not too sure on how to kind of interact and deal with these powers that be. And until we find a way to kind of change our mindset and how we interact with these people in our day-to-day lives, that's where the kind of problems lie. In the sense that you were saying that everybody's a kind of Hector in a way, because Hector has more of an inferior complex with, what's his name, the Thistlewood.
I think it's like what you're saying is that in the world that we all hectors. I think the reason for that is a loss of spirit, people being in touch with themselves. I would say the spirit to me is God or Allah, Jah or whatever. But it's that loss of natural. When we wake up, there's no sun shining because it's grey. It's the whole, we live in the town block, all our food is fake. All these kind of things, it's the loss with the natural world, which is a loss with our naturalness to fight. Now we just give up, everything's given to us. You don't have to go out and fight for anything, you don't have to go out and work for anything, you don't have to go out and kill your food. It's all given to you. So it's this.
Yeah, capitalism creates consumers.
Yeah,
That's what capitalism does. Whereas human beings are naturally producers. Human beings make things. It's our labor that actually creates all around. But capitalism tries to dumb us down and turn us into just consumers.
I was just asking if these African onlookers as well, looking at the international labor migration as well, because if you are active and you don't have an audience, it seems like you won't be, it's nothing. You need an audience, you need people to look at you, what you are doing. So I'm looking at the way international migration, and people are coming here as workers here, coming here as foreign workers and all this stuff, and boosting the same imperialists. So I'm wondering, what's going to happen for Africa as well, because there are resistant movement. People are against people coming here. The brain drain that is happening in our homelands, in the Caribbean, and in Africa as well, and still continue. Everybody there who's getting successful wants to come to the first world countries as well, and boosting the same imperialism.
I mean, it's a real problem. I haven't got time to go into that because that's, you see, look, I'm quite prepared to come here on other occasions and look at some of these subjects, because what this is doing is it's actually opening up the world. Once you understand neocolonialism, you can start to fit that into any framework of analysis anywhere in the world. This is not just a story of African people. This comes out of our history, so we see it as African people. But a non-African who understands neocolonialism can see what's happening in their situation. And even those of us that are Africans here in this wicked beast of a place called Britain, we can see the neocolonialism that we face because they pick people out of the African community to be hectors against the rest of us.
Exactly.
Here, we see them with our own eyes, and, you know, and then they make some of them MPs and put them in the House of Lords and do all kinds of things. And it's their job to shit in our mouths. That's their job. They just don't have to draw down their, you know, their trousers or lift up their skirt in public to do it. But let me move on. Oh, sorry, you've got to go ahead.
Yeah, I just have like a bunch of questions to ask you. Like, okay, when you discuss about like you believe that, okay, you discuss the past, the present,
yeah,
and to end, like you said, the conclusion, you have to look at the way forward.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you, like, okay, you say fear, because that's one of the fundamental things that you've been. How would you tell the house? Like, what would you recommend? How would you overcome fear? And secondly, we've been ruled for so long, and we've not come up with a formula on how to spot the hector.
Can I just say something? Don't tell no one what God.
I mean, that's
overcoming the fear. Because you're fearing man.
It's like you know God, but how did you go about knowing God?
It's faith.
Would you say just having just like for God?
It's reminding yourself of what you know God by what's right or wrong, by what you feel. It's no wrong. I can't turn around and tell you this is my opinion. I can't turn around and tell you. So you know that if you're going to do something, your inner spirit tells you whether it's right or wrong, but you have the choice to overcome that. The same way that you have the choice not to be a hector and to be a resistor, is to overcome that fear.
By knowing God.
You know,
by knowing yourself.
Well, I mean, we can look at immaterial aspects and we can look at material aspects. Yeah, but I think what I will say, you posed a question to me, but if you were listening carefully, in my opinion, the question has already been answered. So the brother up there in the white, for instance, I mean, he's sitting back now because he solved the problem, really. Yeah? No, I'm not trying to embarrass you, my brother. I just think that you made a fantastic point earlier on. When you actually said that, you know, you have to be, as an African, willing to die for the liberation of your people.
Exactly.
If you're willing to die, and I haven't touched on the resistance and rebellion part of our enslavement history, where people were willing to die for our liberation and achieve great things, you know, for our liberation. You see, that is overcoming fear. I tell you right now, I am prepared to die for my people. I say that to you quite clearly, here right now. Yeah? Just over a week ago, we had the 40th anniversary of the assassination of Malcolm X. Malcolm X knew that he was going to be killed. He talked about them killing him. He knew that when he was going to the Audubon conference theatre, that he would not be coming out alive. He knew this. You see, if we think that our individual lives are the most important thing, then we're hampered. But if we understand that we are part of a collective, and this is African culture at its base now, that the collective is more important than the individual. If we understand that we are part of a collective, then we will overcome that fear.